A big hello to everyone that has joined us today. My name is Andrew Gallagher and welcome along to the Power Platform February webinar. I hope everyone out there has enjoyed their holidays, are fitting well and settled back into either working from home, which most of us are probably still doing, or some potentially might be back in the office. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available after the event on the User Group YouTube channel. If you don't want to be recorded, you will need to drop off the meeting right now, please. Now, I'm not sure about everyone else, but I've really been enjoying watching the Winter Olympics. It's been fascinating 2 weeks of competition over the last 2 weeks, and hope everybody's been enjoying that. Today's webinar is proudly presented by the Power Platform Community User Group. We have partnered with Microsoft to create this group, and we are passionate about the Power Platform and are keen to increase and share our knowledge while keeping up to date with all of the latest information. I feel this user group is the perfect platform to achieve these goals, and I encourage everyone out there to join the group and participate in the conversations. It's also great to see the group growing in numbers each week, and a quick shout out to Bill, who's been working tirelessly on it every day. For any questions, there will be a Q&A at the end of the webinar, or if it's contact needs more detail, we'll follow up after the event. Please post them into the user group discussion forum. Today's agenda consists of a quick introduction about our presenters, leading into the current news from the user group. Then onto Yeoman's presentation on Power Automate Desktop, followed by some Power App solution demonstrations by Bill and myself. If time permits, I will take questions from the floor, and please stick around for our virtual cup of tea afterwards. Today's presenters are Bill Mallett, Yeoman Yo, and myself, Andrew Gallagher. We're all keen in creating a Microsoft 365 modern workplace and use the Power Platform to automate and streamline business processes. We've also done many Microsoft certifications and happy to answer any queries that you may have on the certification process. So coming up is our first lot of news. That's our update. So we'll just jump over to the news here. And Yeoman's going to kick us off. No, actually, I've got that wrong. I'm first talking about the Power Automate pane in Power Apps. Now you may, Microsoft has just released last week that there's now a new option to add Power Automate with a pane directly into Power Apps. You can now create new flows or add existing flows and even edit existing flows using Power Automate pane within the Power App Studio. You don't have to browse to Power Automate to work with flows and then return to the Power App Studio for app editing. But in order to use this capability, you'll have to enable the Power Automate pane setting. Now, please note that this feature must be enabled on a per app basis. So if you've enabled it in one app, it won't be enabled in all of your apps. So for every app, you need to actually manually go in and enable the feature. Flows that you create or edit and save inside the Power App Studio are also visible and available in Power Automate. Save changes to the flow using the Power App Studio will remain intact if you close the Power App Studio without saving the changes to the app. So all of those changes will be in Power Automate if you leave the Power App Studio and go into Power Automate. If you remove the flow from your Canvas app, this doesn't delete the flow from Power Automate. Now, it's also important to note that this feature is being rolled out depending on your region, so it may not be available on your tenant. It's also important to note that this is a preview, and previews aren't meant for production use and may have restricted functionality. I'm just going to quickly bring up over here how to quickly show that. So over here you see the settings options. I've just got open here a brand new Canvas app, nothing except a screen. So to enable the feature, you go to settings, go to upcoming features, and turn on enable the Power Automate pane. Once you've turned that on, you do have to close and reopen the application, and then that will give you that feature. Now I'm going to hand over to Yeoman, who's going to talk about our Power Virtual Agents customer playbook.
Thanks, Andrew. Basically, Microsoft have released a playbook that allows customers to work out how to approach building very large Power Virtual Agents, or bots as we know them. So it gives you a manner of how to choose your team, to what sort of stages that you want to work out in developing such a large bot, and who's responsible, and what other complexities you need to consider when actually approaching such a project. It's quite an extensive playbook. It is aimed a little bit more at the enterprise, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of the concepts that are in here can have some application for small to medium business in developing a bot or Power Virtual Agents. So look out for that in the link when you click on it and when you get the slides. What you get to see is basically a lovely PDF like this that you can download that covers all these various setting the goals, who the stakeholders are, some samples, projects, the work and the development lifecycle of such a bot, including testing and what happens when you go live. So it's quite a handy document. I've read somewhat through it, and it's quite extensive, and I'm pretty sure that's very adaptable, especially if you're thinking of developing a bot that can virtually provide a lot of answers to your customers out there. So have a look. I'll hand back over to Bill, who will have some news about our Power Platform group.
Oh, thanks, Yeoman. My update news is to do with our community user group itself. So I just wanted to give some updates on what's happening. What we have is starting today at 3:30. We are now going to have a get together. Anyone who just wants to join us can join the meeting. If you're a member of our group, what you do is you go to our Power Platform community user group. If you go to resources there, you'll notice there's a weekly get together link that'll take you to the team's get together at 3:30 each Friday. So come and join us then whenever you get the chance. And also just a reminder that the discussion group already has quite a few conversations in it. Feel free to jump in and join one of the conversations so that we can be learning together. So now I'll hand back to Andrew. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Bill. Let me just take back the screen. There we go. Okay, now we're going to have our first demonstration, which will be done by Yeoman, about the Power Automate desktop. Over to Yeoman.
Thanks, Andrew. So Power Automate Desktop is something that was released last year and was made available in both Windows 10 and now, of course, in Windows 11. Now, what is Power Automate Desktop, you may ask? So it's basically, if you know what Power Automate is in the cloud, where you can automate tasks between all your various services in the Power Platform, and so you can create different flows that can do things such as move things from a form to a SharePoint list, or from a SharePoint list into things like what we did with our drink orders app, as you can see in the previous webinar. There are many ways you can automate that actually on your desktop, i.e. your actual laptops, computers, that sort of thing. We have Windows 10 and Windows 11. So you can do things that you may have heard of, things like word macros. Well, take that sort of thing where you can automate some of these functions when you push a button into doing things like opening apps, or opening apps and actually doing something with an app, or basically you can do all sorts of different tasks from within your desktop and save time in actually doing certain tasks that you just tend to be mundane, but you can actually automate them with this Power Automate desktop. So how do we start? Well, we start with downloading the actual Power Automate desktop. So if you go to this website, the link is in the notes. So you will see this main website that talks about Power Automate Desktop. And what you do is you can sign in. So if you have a Microsoft 365 license or a Microsoft account, you should be able to sign in to at least try for free. Or if you already are licensed in things like the Power Platform, then you can get access into Power Automate Desktop. So this is the Power Automate page, as you can see here. There, we've been before with creating things like the drink orders app. But if you go up into the top right-hand corner, you can actually click on the question mark and actually download the Power Automate Desktop. So once you click on it and it starts downloading, you can execute the installation. So what happens when you start installing it? Well, what you get is this install screen. So I'll walk you quickly through this install screen, and what you can do is you can install one app to run Power Automate Desktop, standard stuff, and just click the obligatory terms of use install, and off you go and let it run. So as it installs, it talks about basically, let's just get rid of that screen down there. So if we go back to that screen, if you actually follow through what was the intro screen here, you can actually read through the blog about how you can use things with Power Automate Desktop as well. And how there are various examples, such as importing documents and that sort of thing. And you can also do other sort of desktop flows to reduce some of the sorry, that's my phone ringing. And this install should be just finished. Still going. So it's actually quite easy to use, and you can start small. And that's my recommendations. You start small, pick a few tasks that you feel that you can actually, and there's some extensions that you can enable, so you can integrate with some of your more popular browsers, because then you can actually start doing things with Power Automate Desktop integrating with the browsers on your computer. So you just launch it, just close that, and it will just launch in a second. And I will walk you through the various components that you can use with Power Automate Desktop. And of course, I have to sign in with my account.
While you're signing in there, Yeoman.
Yep.
The one thing I found with the Power Automate Desktop, it's sort of a great thing to use on legacy systems where you're trying to get data entered into a system that doesn't have any direct way of putting data into the system. Would you recommend running it, on your own desktop or in a virtual machine?
I'd run it on both. The good news about this sort of system is that it actually allows for export and import of things you've developed on your desktop, because some of us have multiple systems that are set up exactly the same way. So I have a desktop computer, I have a Surface, and of course, as you can see here, I've got a cloud PC. And you sometimes want to actually export and import some of those solutions that you've already developed into this. So basically, we'll start the tour and just create a new flow. So got it. So this is actually already copied across, believe it or not, a routine I set up, which I'll walk you through creating. And that was a task that I ran into as a problem, which is Microsoft Teams sometimes jams up on me. I'm using Teams day in and day out. And occasionally you'll find that the posts or some of the things in your team aren't up to date to what they should be. Because Microsoft Teams is more like a front-end web browser style thing like Internet Explorer or Edge, occasionally you need to clear some of what we call the cache, or the buildup of old files in the app. So I created this routine to actually basically do that, because if I show you how the steps of actually doing it manually, yeah, there's a reason why I decided, well, this would be a great way to test out Power Automate Desktop. So where you start from is a new flow. So basically a flow is just the routine that you want to automate, and then we'll just create a test one, or you can auto generate one. So just hit create, and therefore you'll just create it, and there we can start editing it. So what you can do is a myriad of things. So yes, talks about this desktop flow designer, and a lovely little guide about you can actually record the steps of your flow, organize it into subflows if you have a very extended flow, and use variables. It's very much similar to what you do see in just the cloud version of Power Automate. The only additional things are things like you can actually utilize the UI elements. So we're talking about dialog boxes, pop-up boxes, of how things look and feel within your Power Automate desktop flow. And there's all these other things like using the images, and of course you can debug it, just very much like your standard cloud flow. So on the left-hand side, you can see a list of actions that you can do. So you can actually do something like, as you can see, things like Microsoft Excel, and basically what you can do is simply start by a simple step such as launching Excel. So I have to just drag it into the main flow screen, and you can say launch Excel with a blank document and make it visible. So if I hit save, it will add that as a step, and you can automatically start to play or run what you've actually created. So if I hit run, it should actually start opening Excel. It should pop up because Excel's installed, and there we go. There's Excel, blank workbook. So you can, as you can see, you can close and then rerun it. So what you can do is you can actually add steps. So you can actually add close Excel, for instance. I know it's all sounds very boring, but to actually, when you start working with Power Automate Desktop and you start building your flow, you should always try and do it in small steps. Baby steps will mean that you can work out how to do a simple part of it, and then you can start building in your additional complexities and various other parts of your flow. And that way, when it comes to debugging it, that way you don't, whenever there's something is a problem, then you can work out what steps might have not worked. So I could launch Excel, close Excel, obviously do things like actually add data to a cell, and you could then, and that's just Excel. So you could actually do things with all these other variables, if you can see. So you can even prepare an email, receive email, send it. A lot of things that may see in the cloud version, but you can actually interact with things like on a desktop. So if you start working with it, you can then see that there's so many different things you could potentially do, not only with interacting with things on your desktop computer, but as you can see, there's things like Azure, AWS, and various other SharePoint lists, and a lot of other stuff that is in the cloud. So you can start automating tasks, and people have created a lot of tasks out there, such as scraping text and content from websites to taking documents like you get from an email, such as an invoice or whatever, and actually automating it by plunking it into Excel or putting it into some other on desktop function. What we're going to do as a more extended demo is run through this routine that I've already created, which was the reset teams cache. So what you can do with it is, we'll just remove these variables. And I will show you what you manually have to do to show how complex a task it is, which is basically you open to reset Teams cache, you actually have to A, close Teams, and B, you need to then go to the particular folder that is where the cache is held. And while there's no reset button in Teams to do this, you actually have to manually go through various folders, boring as it is, and actually then go into the particular folder and then go and delete basically the cache. So this entire folder just needs to be wiped of files. Now, as you can see, a million mouse clicks. What a pain in the bum that it is that I have to actually do to just make that work. So what I did was I decided, well, why don't I just create one button that allows me to do that and then get my teams back online as quick as possible without working out, what's the folder again, and that sort of thing. So all you have to do is you start small, and what you want to do is you want to get the folder where you're wanting to clear. So under folder, I got a special folder, and special folders are some of those folders that you regularly see on Windows, and it's automatically known to Windows what those folders are. So in this case, it was application data, and that's done. So that's one step. So I've got that folder, and then I need to get to that specific folder that actually needs to be deleted. So what I wanted to do was go to empty folder. Like I said, very intuitive stuff once you start working with it. So what I want to do is I want to actually empty the folder. And where did I go? Microsoft Teams cache.
While you're choosing the folder there, Yeoman,
Yep.
do you know whether the actions that I can see there on the left-hand side, any of them like a premium action? You know how in normal Power Automate they've got premium actions and connectors. Are any of them premium, or are they all just available?
Some are premium, I think, with the ones especially that are outside the Microsoft sphere.
Yep.
So things like AWS, I'm pretty sure that that's a premium function.
Right.
So anything outside of the Microsoft sphere tends to be a premium function. Not so sure about Azure, but at some point it will warn you when you're about to enter the realm of premium. So
Perfect. Yeah.
So in here on error, now that should work. Variables produced. Sorry, just come back to here. Delete the contents of the folder. I know what I'm missing. Basically, you can insert a variable. The variable here is that special folder path that we actually had in the here, and I should be able to add a variable. Select the variable. That was it. So basically, you search that, and therefore it inserts what we did in the first step, which was get just the application data folder and just add in the this part of it, which I did before. So save. And so what happens is now we actually have a routine that will get special folder, which is the Teams cache folder, and then empty it. So I'll save my work, which is the other thing you should do as with Flow in the cloud, which is save your work constantly, just so you don't lose it. And then what you do is once it's saved is we'll run this routine and see what happens. So when we run it, it's going to fail. Can't delete it. Why? It's because Teams is open. So if I close Teams and if I quit Teams, it'll actually should exit. And when it exits, I should be able to run it. There you go. Teams has disappeared. I will run this again. And what should happen is it should just work. How can you tell? Well, you won't, except for if we go back into this folder that we had to go into before, it should actually appear empty. And oops, wrong folder. So what we should find is under that special folder, it should now be completely empty, as you can see there. So that, in a nutshell, you've got is the functional aspect of it. But I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. What I tend to do is because this is a desktop version, we're not seeing pop-up boxes or any notifications that something has actually happened. No one likes not being told that something is or isn't happening. So what we can do is we can actually add other things like those pop-up boxes. So see in message boxes, so we can actually display a message. I'll just drag it into that, and I actually drag it in before. And I will call it the, let's see what we can call it. Please reset. So please quit before proceeding. You press OK. What you can do is you can actually put in a message button that says OK, because it forces the user to actually open and then close Teams. So what we can do is put that, and then we can actually put a message after it. The routine has run. And it will just be a simple, friendly message that says Teams reset complete. And we'll just say that your Teams is ready to use again with another OK box. Keep that message on top and save. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire up Teams, and we're going to run through this routine again. So the other things you can do outside of this is you can start using subflows. So what we'll do is when you run this and we run this thing is we'll close this, and what should happen is it should run through. Oops, it ran through the wrong step. So it ran through and it says, look, can't. Okay, it's because I didn't close Teams. So what you can do is you can actually add special subroutine that actually detects whether it hasn't been closed. So what you can do here is you can add a subroutine. But that says, well, make sure that Teams is closed. So let's close Teams. There's a special thing you can do. So what we can do is you can add a subroutine and so on and so forth. But you get the idea of once you start building, you can start building on with a routine, and eventually you come up with something very useful that you can automate. So I think that's about time up for my demo. Are there any other questions from anyone?
No, I was just going to say that now that I'm jumping out of my company teams into our user group teams, I'm finding this very handy, clearing it out, because sometimes when you jump in and out of different teams, it just gets stuck on the load. And yeah, when you showed me this earlier, Yeoman, to clear the cache, it was a very handy thing to run through the night. And now when I sort of jump in and out, it seamlessly does it.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I did it, because it has been a pain for some of my clients come to me and they have had their teams jam up. So
Yep.
I created this routine and I implemented on their systems so that they just, all they have to do is literally hit a button. So the other thing, of course, you can do is with your flows, you can actually export them too. So if I just save and close that, you can actually export them.
Robert's just asked a question down there in the chat, Yeoman. Can he run his PowerShell scripts with this?
Yes, I believe you can. Just go and open this. So you should be able to, on the left-hand side, you should see actually be able to see commands that you can run. And so it will be possible to run things like PowerShell scripts. Let me see. So as you can see, you can run the PowerShell script. So you just have to input that into your desktop routine. About the only hold up in your PowerShell scripts is if you're accessing certain things that require additional authentication, but I'm pretty sure you could implement some of that in the running of one of these flows. Like I said, you start small, then as you run into use cases, you can actually build in subflows that actually handle that or give extra instructions. But the beauty about this over, say, a cloud version from a desktop point of view is the ability to display not only messages on the screen that indicate what you're going to do, but also interact with things on your desktop like you saw with files and folders and things like Excel. So as I said, some of the things that I've seen out there have to do with opening a website and actually literally copying some of the content from a website right through to importing version invoices and things that you receive via email or other means, and then having it put into something like an overall Excel spreadsheet or uploading to a different SharePoint site or various other things. So there's a lot of stuff that you can actually do with this, and you don't necessarily need to be a premium user, especially if you're using other parts of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And the other part, of course, is you can export them. So I did run into this export thing before, but can create a copy and.
So what you're saying by export it out to a file and then import it into on
That's
another
right.
computer or VM.
Yep. So I think we had to basically edit this, and there was an option to save as, and it'll save it as a package file, and you can then copy it and import it. So there you go, file save as. Hang on.
So yeah, so creating one in your office, testing it all, getting it all right, and then exporting it as a
That's right.
package and taking it out on site.
Yes.
Sounds good, because then you know it's going to work when you go out on site.
One other tip is Microsoft is always updating things like Power Automate Desktop. So make sure when you go into the settings, you make sure that you get to show update notifications, and then you'll just get notified automatically as a pop-up, and you just follow and get it updated. Any other questions in the chat?
I was just thinking more of a statement than a question, but another application that I've found very useful is in your cloud flows, Excel's treated like a table, but if you want to manipulate it like as more of a form, the controls aren't really there in the cloud flow, but Power Automate Desktop allows you to do your Excel type of stuff as a form, and I've done that to create an invoice process for a friend of mine. So that's another application of using the desktop that you can use to get started with something small, perhaps.
Yeah, and I encourage usage because this is actually a good little building playground to work on certain things about how you understand the logic of flows, not only at a desktop level, but then you can take it to that sort of learning into the cloud version as well. All right.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Yeoman. That was a great demonstration on the Power Automate desktop. Definitely learned a lot there on inserting those actions and how you can sort of go and modify them and get into the nitty gritty. And maybe possibly in the future we can sort of expand on that and create a bigger one, time permitting, of course. So next we're going to have a couple of solution demonstrations. I'm going to show how I use a spinner in Power Apps and why I do that. And then Bill's got one on some dates. So, but let me just drag this little application that I've created. Now, the reason I use a spinner is that when we create an app, we have no idea on what device it may be run on, how powerful that device is, how much memory it's got, how much CPU it's got. So when I'm sort of testing my application, it might be instantaneously on my computer, but on a user's computer, that's a few years old, things may be a little bit slower. Now, let's say I'm loading data up and the user's waiting for it. I know users can get a bit impatient, start clicking all the way around on the application, start clicking buttons and so forth. And what happens is once the data is loaded, the app has remembered that and then starts pressing all of those buttons, and the user gets a horrible experience because things start opening up. So to stop this from occurring, what I do is I put a spinner. Now, I have grabbed a spinner. Let me just quickly show you what this spinner looks like. I've grabbed this spinner off the internet. There's plenty of them available out there that you can just download. And then you can add this spinner to your application simply as an image. So if I click here I have my spinner in this image here. I've actually by default got it hidden because I don't want it visible until the user is doing something. And of course, I've created a variable that says show spinner, and then I either set that to true, or here I set that to false. I set that to false when I want to turn it off. So the other thing, well, there's my on select gone. There it is. There, I'm changing the my variable there to false. That variable then on my image is displayed, is set here. So when the variable sets to true, it's visible. When it's set to false, the image is not displayed. I also, because the spinner only takes up a certain amount of my screen, I also have a rectangle that basically covers the entire screen. I've deliberately left it off those buttons. Covers the whole screen, and as you can see, when that gets enabled, it shows the user that they can't press on anything because of the light grayness, and shows the spinner, that something is happening. So what I've done is I've actually created a timer here. So when I click on this timer, it's going to start the spinner. And as you can see, I can't click on any of the buttons. The spinner's showing that something's happening. And when my timer hits 10 seconds, which is the end of the processing, I'm back and I can hit my buttons. I can press my buttons again. I can start, stop, and away. So basically, it's a very, very easy way, because all I have to do is set this variable before I start loading up the data, and then set the variable back to false after the data is loaded. And the user will see the spinner running during the load of the data and not be tempted to click on anything else while that is happening. And it just lets the user know that, processing is happening. Please be patient. Now I'm going to hand it over to Bill, that's going to talk about a date problem that he came across.
Thanks, Andrew. I am going to do that, but just before I do that, what I thought I might do is actually show um, a little thing that I did similar to your issue, where people were, they had to click on something and then some processing had to happen. In my case, the processing was going to happen in the background, but the user couldn't even tell whether I clicked on something. So what I did, so that the user didn't keep on clicking like you were suggesting with your situation, I've got no need to wait, but I just want to make sure that they understood. So I also set a variable which is actually a label that will appear, and so it checks for when it's true. This label on the record is true. I make sure I refresh the screen when they've clicked on this button, so that this label suddenly appears when they clicked on the button, and they don't wonder whether or not anything's actually happening in the background. They can move on. So I thought that's probably worth thinking about. Another thing, if you don't have to wait, but you still want to tell people that you're having they've actually done something that's useful, then it's very good that that's the case. Anyway, let me move on to hopefully I'm sharing my other screen now. And what I'm going to do is deal with dates. Now, when you're accessing not your columns, your rows out of a list or out of a Dataverse table, you don't try and get back all the records and then process them all in your Power Automate. What you do is you use a filter, an OData filter, to make sure you only get back the records you're interested in. But we've found at times that if you're trying to compare to a date, and particularly today's date, there can be some issues. So I've created this list here. You can see I've created it within Teams, and I've got this date here that I want to compare. Now notice I've called it compare date and not just date, because that's another issue you can come across with OData filters. If I just call this date, when I do the filtering, it might recognize date as not the value, the column here in this field, but some other kind of generic use of date. So you have to make sure that you name date fields very specific, so that when you have to use them in filters, they're okay. So here's my field. You can see I've got 4 titles and they've got a few dates, and one of them happens to be today's date here. So hopefully we can retrieve just this T3 today's date. Now let's create our Power Automate. Now within Teams, you can see I've already got the Power Automate tab, but if you haven't got it in your team yet, you can create your, in Teams, you click on the plus and you choose Power Automate. Now, if it's not appearing up the top here, it is for me because I've used it. You do a search for Power Automate and find it and click on it, and then you'll get a Power Automate tab within your within your team channel. So now let's click on the Power Automate tab here, and to start a new flow, we just click on New Flow over here, and it's just like using it within the normal Automate process. But it goes straight into creating our flow. So the first thing, we just want to do a test flow, so we'll just manually start it. So we create a manual trigger, and the next step we're going to add is we're going to compare it to today's date. So we need to get today's date first. So what we need to do is do that search for the current time. That's the action that gets you. So if I do a search and for current, and we'll see current time is down there. So we search for current time, no parameters. It's just going to pass us back to the time. But what's the issue? Well, the issue is current time passes it back in UTC time, which if you're doing it at the wrong time of the day, might actually get you a different date. So we really need to convert that time into our own time zone, don't we? So let's do our next action, which is a convert action on a date and time. So convert time zone. Okay, so the base time. So what is that? Well, that's the current time that we got. So we click on there and use our dynamic content, current time. So we got our time, the time zone. Now, what's the time zone? Now, if you look in the middle of the list of time zones, UTC is always going to be there in the middle. So you scroll down to the middle and then you select your time zone. And for us, that's Canberra, Melbourne, Sydney, which is always down near the bottom for us. So keep going, keep going. There we go. Canberra, Melbourne, Sydney. So you can see there now we're going to convert our time. Now, what the other thing you need to be careful with your OData is that it actually returns this in the right kind of format that will work for your list. And in our case, it's the short date pattern. So let's make sure we convert it, not just into our time zone, but into the right format for us. Okay, so before we get any further, probably a good idea to save. So let's just go up here and so that we can save it, because if something happens, we're going to lose it at this stage if we haven't first saved it. We'll auto save after this. So now we've saved it. We're not going to lose anything we've done. Okay, so what's our next step? Now, the next step is the important one of getting that item based on our date. So we do a get action, and we've got a SharePoint list. So we're going to get an item from our SharePoint list. First, we choose the site address, which is our webinar demos team. And we've got one list in there called today's title. And then the most important thing that we're talking about here is our filter. So how do we fill out this filter variable? Now, the first thing is our column name, which is compare, it's out of the way, compare date, with all the right capitals in the right places. Now, the equals for this is EQ, not the equal sign, but EQ. And then the value we want to get is the actual formatted converted date. Now, it's very important you put this within single quotes. So we open our single quote and we get our converted time from our dynamic content, and make sure you close that single quote. They're tiny little things, these single quotes, and easy to miss if you're checking your work. That's very important that that has those single quotes around it. And this is where it could go wrong if our column was called just date, because it might actually not be picking up the column we think it is when we're doing that. Now, to prove that we have done it right, we want to output a message back to show that we've got the right value. So let's quickly do that. Well, because we're dealing with dates, we need to convert it to a form that will output. So you have to do a compose action in order to convert your date into a text format. So our input there is going to be, where have we got it? Dynamic comment converted the get item, we just want to show myself quickly. There we are, compare date. We want our compare date. And notice it doesn't apply to each. This those new to Power Automate will wonder what's just happened there, but because the get items could potentially get more than one column that matches this situation, Power Automate automatically creates a loop for us to go through. In our case, we're only going to find one, but if there was two with today's date, it would actually do this output for us twice. And what are we going to do? Let's just post a message back into our channel with the right data on it. So let me search for a post action, post message in our chat or channel. We're going to do it just as the flow bot, and where we're going to post it into our channel. So which team is this channel in? Okay, so the webinar demos team. And what's the channel? And there's our OData filter today's date, and we'll put a quick message in there, a message from Automate, and let's put our values in there. So let's put the title we got and the date, which has been converted using our compose, so we get the output from the compose. So let's save that now and test it and see if it actually did the job. So we can do a manual test directly here from within our editing panel. Signs you in first, then we have to run the flow. It will show us what we can watch it finish. And when it's finished, hopefully run successfully, we go back out to our posts in our channel, and here we see a new message, and it's got the right one, T3, on today's date. So we can see that's the way to go about getting the right column from your list, or not the right column, the right row from your list, or using your OData filter when it comes to today's date. So that's my little demo, Andrew. So back to you.
Thank you, Bill. I just want to just also note on what Bill said there. Power Automate does autosave every 2 minutes, but only after you've saved the flow for the first time. So that very first save is very important, because many times I've created a flow and yeah, hard and sort of lost some data because I haven't initially saved it. So now I've made a mental note to save it as soon as I create a title. Okay, so that's the end of our solution demonstrations. So now we're at our Q&A time. If anyone's got any questions from the floor, that's from people who are connected. Darren's just typing some as we speak. And I think I've got a question from the group as well, which I was going to. Thank you, Darren. Yes, it was a great presentation by Yeoman. Can you share a desktop flow? Yeoman, I'm going to hand over to you for that one.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Let me just bring back up my slide. The answer is, yeah, you should be able to share a desktop flow. What you do is that the flow should actually come into your Power Automate portal. And let me just share screen. But yeah, the simple answer is yes. There is a way to do it. Oh, my screen's messed up.
While
I'm setting up.
Yeah, while you're setting that up, a question from the user group was, how many data connectors and controls can I use in a Canvas app? Now, there are limits. You should limit the number of data connections and number of controls. I wouldn't connect more than 30 data sources in the same app, and I wouldn't add, and this is a lot of controls, more than 500 controls on the same app. I personally would desperately avoid creating a mega app, where you've got multiple data sources and controls, because it will become very sluggish and slow. My advice would be is to break that into smaller apps, or even consider a model-driven app for different processes rather than having everything in Canvas apps. Yeoman,
Yeah, so the way to do it is share screen. Is you need to share this one, right? There is an article here on it for a start, so there is that which I'll post to you. But the idea is you actually go into the into desktop flows. Now, for some reason, that hasn't worked for me, but in here, your flows that you've created in your desktop should actually synchronize up here into the portal. And from there, you can do your export and sharing. So I have to work out why it hasn't done it for me. But the idea is that, even from the sample screen, that you should be able to see all of your desktop flows that you've created. They should have synchronized up to the Portal Power Automate platform. And there, from here, you should be able to therefore do the things like export and sharing with others. So I just don't know why it hasn't worked for me, but I guess that's something I'll dig into and figure it out.
I'm assuming it's your cloud PC that just hasn't synced your cloud flows from your desktop PC at the moment.
It's possible, but yeah.
Just go to that Microsoft Docs again.
Yep. I was just hang on.
Sorry, I put you on the spot there.
No. Right, it's the screen's got thrown off. So if I'm just going to post that in.
Actually, yeah, post it into the chat.
And there we go.
Beautiful. So that's into the chat. I've just on the screen you can see some resources, some useful links that we feel will help people with their Power Platform journey. Firstly, once again, we've got our user group, which we would love everyone to join and be part of our community. Followed by some selected Microsoft Learning resources. As Yeoman's just posted in the chat, the Microsoft Docs. There's plenty of docs on all the different topics on the Power Platform. We've specifically chosen a few there. And lastly, there's some Microsoft training days, which Microsoft run basically 2 a month on all, which is a very fundamental and beginner's guide into either Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Automate Desktop, Power BI. And once you've done that, Microsoft will offer you a free exam voucher to sit the fundamentals exam, to test your learnings from the training.
Just like to jump in there, Andrew. Microsoft also has a special week-long training camp, or I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly what they call it, in many different streams coming up in the next couple of weeks, whereby they give you 1 or 2 hours training a day, and at the end of the week on the Friday, that 1 or 2 hours, if that stream is suitable for it, is actually exam preparation day. And once again, some free access to the exams related to the stream that you've been learning on. So I'll find a link to that and put it in our community discussion, but well worth taking a look at. Instead of having to spend a whole day on the training in a day, they spread it out over a week and give you actual exam training at the end of the week. So it could be worth jumping into if you're interested.
Fantastic. Yeah, Microsoft have been really good, especially in, with COVID and lockdowns and so forth. They have really ramped up the online training and for people to take and learn to use the products. I would like to thank personally thank everybody for attending today's webinar. Once again, it was proudly presented by our Power Platform Community User Group. We would love everybody to join our community at the link on the page. I wish you a very good Friday. Hope the rest of your day and have a great weekend. Please, I'm about to stop the recording, but please stick around for our virtual cup of tea, coffee, hot chocolate, whatever you've got next to your computer there. And yeah, we'll chat to you guys off air. Anyway, that's a goodbye from all of us, and take care.